Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's training webinar with the Land App. I'm Dan Gira, and I'm the Innovation and Partnership Lead here at Land App. Today, I'm going to be really talking about the main features and functions that we have to help you either be part of a farm group or to facilitate a group of farms. Before we get started, just want to touch on a couple of bits of housekeeping. As this is a webinar, your camera and microphone will remain off for the duration of the webinar. However, doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. Please do use the Q&A function, which is located at the bottom of your screen. And we have enabled voting system as well, I believe. So if there's a particular question you see come up on the Q&A, do feel free to vote that upwards. At the end, we've got 15 minutes to talk through those, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. The session's being recorded, so it will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. It takes about 3 to 5 days, so please bear with us on that. And then the final note is just once you leave the webinar, either at the end or if you have to leave early, not a problem, you'll be redirected to a web browser where there's 5 questions. If you could just answer those for us, it just helps both inform these webinars, but also a future direction of where we're going next. So the agenda today, I'm just going to spend 5 minutes overviewing just Land App and also a bit more about facilitation funds generally, or farm groups, farm clusters, lots of different names for them. And then I'm going to spend 40 minutes or so talking through the main Land App functions that you can use to start facilitating a group of farms. This will include a bit of a deep dive on best practice in terms of formatting your maps and just making sure they're named correctly, how to use our team tags. So as part of our subscription, you can tag different maps to start organizing your team, your cluster, how you can define a farm boundary. So there will be elements of today's webinar, probably only 5 minutes maximum, where we recap what we covered last week, but it will include defining a farm boundary and creating a land cover map. I'm then going to be using countryside stewardship template as just a way of illustrating creating a farm plan. But as a note, we are talking about next week biodiversity offsetting. So if you are more interested in the UK HAB space, I think next Tuesday we've got a webinar on biodiversity offsetting that may be of interest. We'll then be looking at publishing to map of maps. So it's a feature that we've built pretty much with facilitation funds in mind and farm groups in mind. And I'd just like to demo that. And then finally, we've just launched our new reports dashboard, which I'll also be demonstrating. As a note, because of the way that the demo is working, a lot of the services we show today are part of a subscription. I've indicated that on the agenda there with an asterisk, and there will be a question at the end if you want to learn more about the pricing, getting a quote, for example, for the facility. Let us know through that survey. Okay. Just a note, last week's session, the recording was great. I think we had nearly 500 people attend, so really nice to see so many people coming to the webinar. The recording of that is now live on our YouTube channel, so you can find that at the Land App on YouTube. High level, just to recap on what the Land App is, I'm hoping for this demo that you at least got an idea of what the Land App can do. We're not going to be going through the basic uses, but I do just want to touch on some of the key points that I mentioned last week. Firstly, for the last 5 or 6 years, we've really been putting ourselves in the center of data aggregation. We aggregate live data from a whole manner of sources, government agencies, research bodies, etc., and trying to put them all in one place, but in a place that you can create your own plans on top of themselves. So similar to what Magic Maps does, however, we've got the additional functionality that allows you to create plans, collaborate with one another, and share where you last were. So similar data, just slightly different use case. We're also extremely proud of all the different users that we've got. We're growing as a tool. I think we've got nearly 17,000 people have now used the software, and we're very grateful to everyone that's contributed with ideas. We wouldn't be where we are without your input. Whether you're a research body, a land agent, a supermarket, a farm cluster, we're very grateful to have you here, and we're looking forward to seeing this partner network grow. Before I dive into the actual technical demo, I just wanted to spend 2 minutes just outlining one of our clusters that we're working with. And thanks to the Northeast Cotswold Farm Cluster, based just in the Northern Cotswolds, for sharing just 2 images of their cluster as of today. I gave Tim a call this morning. They've been using the Land App for the last couple of years. I think they've now mobilized 130 farmers of which a number of those are involved in a DEFRA scheme, so going through public funding, but they're also now looking at private funding, ways of achieving their goals through the private market, whether that's through watercourse protection, biodiversity offsetting, carbon markets, etc. And so this is an overarching map of some of their cluster, just their locations relative to the AONB and to certain water bodies. And then in particular, their government trial, so their ELMS trial, is trying to protect the even load catchment. And you can see here all the various countryside stewardship interventions that they're putting in across, I think, 40 odd farms. And it's just a really nice illustration of just that high level visualization that LandApp can provide. All of that data is underpinned by clean, authoritative data, so you can extract reports as well. But I just thought I'd show a bit of a case study there before diving into the nitty-gritty of how to use the LandApp. Throughout this demo, I really want you to keep in mind 4 key rules for when you're using the LandApp, particularly when you're trying to organize multiple stakeholders, multiple management holdings, each of which have got their own way of working. We really want you to use LandApp in a way that both facilitates their independence, but also encourages their collaboration as well. So rule number 1 is just have one map per farm. And what I mean by this is if your farmer members already have a LandApp map that they've called, say, Manor Farm Smith, don't worry about creating a new one. If they're happy to share that map with you, you can actually use that map as the one source of truth. Often we see people try and maintain 2 separate maps. 2 people are upkeeping a basic payment plan or a cropping plan or a stewardship plan, which just means that things get out of sync. The LandApp is designed for you to have one source of truth for the farm, whether it's administered by you, the facilitator, or by the farm themselves, or maybe the agent that represents the farmer, doesn't really matter. The software is set up that you can all work from that one source of truth. So have one map per farm. Secondly, use folders to archive important documents. We do have an archive function, which you can use, and I will show you later. However, we've also introduced folders into that left-hand panel for you to file away old claims or old, stewardship agreements, for example, that you can always refer back to, and it just keeps the map looking nice and clean. Third rule is just name maps consistently. I'd say probably the most important rule, especially as we're now introducing this reports dashboard, is try and be quite strict on yourself in terms of how you name the plans. Too often do I see either new map or new map 1 or just Manor Farm. Out there's a lot of Manor Farms and there's a lot of new maps. If you're on top of your naming convention, it will make your life a lot easier. And we've got a suggested nomenclature that you can use as optional. So name your maps consistently. And then finally, when defining a boundary, try and use both land registry and, for those in England, also an SBI number. Your land registry will include your entire red line boundary, including your buildings and, say, woodland blocks that you haven't declared to the Rural Payment Agency. And your SBI number, if you're in England, contains a lot of really valuable data that the RPA host in terms of land cover that you can build your plans on. So rule number 4, try and use both land registry and an SBI number rather than just both. We've got a little handout that we will be sharing afterwards that we call the ideal map. This is very much just an indicative guide for how an individual farm within your farm cluster should look once you've completed onboarding them. And the plans on the left-hand side are optional, but I'm just going to talk through some of the key ones now. The infographic includes the name of the plan. So for those that are familiar with the LandApp, we host different plan templates. So a template for stewardship, a template for basic payment, a template for your biodiversity offsetting with UK HAB. And depending on what your workflow is, you want to use that specific plan template. So on this infographic, we put the names of those templates that you can use, what they're used for, so what do you draw on them, and also what you don't draw on them as well. And so what a good map looks like, you've got an individual plan for their farm infrastructure, an individual plan for their farm environment record, et cetera, but they're all named consistently, i.e. the plan acronym _ farm name _ surname. And as I mentioned before, if it's just BPS Manor Farm, and then you introduce another Manor Farm to your cluster, that's when we're going to start seeing a bit of confusion about which one are we referring to. So try and keep farm name and surname consistent as well. The other thing to note is that we've got this published icon that's triggered here, and we'll be covering that during the demo, but you can now publish your data. only publish the data that you want to see on Map of Maps and the ones you want to see in the dashboard as well. Today, I'm going to be focusing on three main plan types. Ownership boundary. So how do you first just onboard a new farm member, defining their ownership boundary? How do you then use their SBI number to create an overarching land use plan using the basic payment template? And then I'm just going to quickly just remind you how to do a countryside stewardship using that same data. The plans itself are kind of up to you which ones you use. However, I'm just purposely avoiding the baseline and the land management plan, these two UK HAB layers, because I'll be covering them next week. But ultimately, that will provide us with a location, an understanding of what they're currently doing, i.e. a baseline, and also a future vision of what they want to do next. Okay, so I'm now going to move across to the Land app and just start working through a bit of a demo. So the first thing to say, just a quick reminder, we're at thelandapp.com. If you haven't got an account, you can come and sign up for free, hitting either the sign up button or the join for free button. You should then be guided through to create a map. What I've done for the demo is I've logged in, and I've also created a demo account within our own Land app account just to represent what a farm cluster might look like as you build. And so the first thing is I'm on something called our organization maps page. I think we formerly called it the maps dashboard, but we've now changed it just to the maps page. And each of these thumbnails represents an individual member of my hypothetical farm cluster. As a note, everything I show today is just going to be hypothetical. I'm not doing any actual data from anywhere. So anything you see on the map doesn't represent actually on the ground. It's just more indicative. And the first thing to say is you can see how I've named each of these plans. So farm A, farm B, farm C, and then the surname. So that could be, keep saying Manor Farm, Spring Cottage, or whatever it might be, with the surname as well. Those can be edited by clicking the three dots and going into the edit button, and then you can edit the name of that map. Also within here, you can apply a team tag, and you can see I've got cluster members. I could have many different tags like farming. Maybe I'm running 2 different clusters or 3 different clusters, but I just want to tag that farm with particular use case that it represents. So I've tagged it with cluster members, which means then I can then filter my maps dashboard by cluster members. If I take that away and maybe turn on farming, that loads up all these other maps that I don't want to see at the moment because I'm in the headspace of being a facilitator. So I leave the cluster map as the tag. Just to quickly show you before I dive into the mapping where that's set up is you need to go to your organization page that might be behind my head, depending on where I am on your screen, by hitting the little menu icon, going into organization, and then within organization, you set up your teams within the teams section. So here's all the different tags that we've got. You can create your own tags, could be the name of the cluster, or it could be, the water body they sit in, for example. You can then tag the maps with that particular tag. Okay, so we're now going to begin a demo of onboarding a new farm. So we're going to start from scratch, creating a new farm member who's just onboarded or is part of my existing farm cluster. And the first thing I would do is I would go to my records, and I'm just going to get an SBI number. I'm then going to come onto Land app and hit new. I'm going to then create a new map, which I'm going to call Slade's Farm, because that's where I'm actually demoing. And I'm going to use my surname, Kira. Okay, so I'm creating Slade's Farm. Automatically, the cluster member is assigned, but if I want to give it another tag, I can, such as farming. Create empty map. From here, I'm then dropped, as per usual, on an empty map. No data currently contained other than an interactive base map that I can change using this OpenStreetMap button at the top right. So I can change for the demo, for example, to go to Ordnance Survey Light. The next thing I can do, and the quickest, is I would always, if you've got an SBI number, hit the new button, hit import data. And the first workflow, as we discussed last week as well, is just import from Rural Payment Agency. I'll come on to it if you haven't got an SBI number, because there are obviously groups that may have people without an SBI number, but a large majority of you will have a 9-digit single business identifier. From here, you can download then from the Rural Payment Agency an up-to-date land cover map, which includes the location of their existing arable, grassland, woodland, and ponds, etc. You can then download the land parcels, which is the authoritative boundary, one polygon per field ID that represents their farm, and also the hedge data, which is an indication of where existing hedges are. However, do treat it with a pinch of salt because we've been using it for a number of years, and it's still not as accurate as we need for a lot of the stuff we're happening. However, it's as good as we can get at the moment. Once you then hit import, you're then asked to choose which of these plan templates do you want to import. And just for speed, I'm going to go straight into a basic payment scheme, and then I'm going to use that area to define an ownership boundary afterwards. It's just a preferred workflow. So I'm going to go into basic payment scheme to start with. I'm going to then change the name of this to meet the infographic that Dan sent me earlier. BPS farm name, which is actually Slade's Farm, sorry, Slade's Farm, comma, Kira, and hit finish. And what that does is that now has sent a request to the RPA using my SBI number, and it's extracted from the RPA's data those 3 data layers that we just touched on: land covers, land parcels, and hedgerows. You can toggle on and off layers on the left-hand side. Be aware that once you've got all 3 on, once you click on a map, the one that's highlighted yellow is the one that you've selected. Lower down the list is further up on the map. So just to demonstrate that, I click here, I can't reach the land covers. If I turn off land parcels, click here, I'm now selecting the land covers. By putting it into basic payment scheme from RPA to basic payment, the land app automatically assigns land use codes when it can. So just to dive into that briefly, each of these greens are permanent grassland. So therefore it's been given a permanent grassland code. It's got the BPS code. It's got the code name as well. Areas that doesn't happen is areas like this, which are declared as arable land. That's just simply the RPA does not release the cropping codes for this year. It's always a bit behind on that because obviously crop codes rotate around the farm. So you then have to assign the codes, which you'll come on to in a moment. So the first thing you want to do as a facilitator is just get an authoritative boundary. And the reason I've done this BPS first is that then gives me quite a nice template for me to at least have a first stab at doing an authoritative ownership boundary. The way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to use Land Registry. So I'm going to use Land Registry to create an ownership boundary. The first thing I need to do is come up to New. I then go Use Templates, which is the first option. I want to find something called an ownership boundary, which I think is down the bottom at the left, depending on what your sector is as well. And that's defined when you sign in. You might have been asked which sector you're in. Depending on which sector you're in would dictate where the ownership boundary is. So just have a look. If you can't see it, just toggle on another sector type. You can flip between them. So I'm choosing ownership boundary. I now want to use the Land Registry, which, as it says here, is all freehold titles for England and Wales. If anyone's in Scotland, we can maybe cover it in the Q&A if that's of interest, but there is some guidance. Basically, it's just through a slightly different workflow. I'm then hitting Pick from Land Registry. What that now has done is that's loaded all the Land Registry titles in my area of interest. And you can probably all see, I can roughly in my head see where that farm just was. But I can't quite remember everything, but I do remember it was this field parcel. So I click on that, and by clicking on that one, because I've got this select all parcels within title toggled on, it's selected both this field parcel and that one. Just to demonstrate, if I turn that off and just select one of them, it only selects the single field parcel. So by default, most of you, I'd imagine, want to keep that title within number and then select the other parcels as well. So they go into an orange shade. Once you're then happy with the field parcels, so I'm not going to label this point, you can hit next, give it a name, which again, remember the ownership boundary, hyphen, what do we underscore? I can't remember now. Slade's Farm Kira, finish. And what that has now done is that has now got a red line boundary, which for most of my farm. And toggling them on and off, I can see that there's slight errors, i.e. slight areas that either the Land Registry is wrong or I've just missed out some areas. And I just want to show you quickly how you can now improve that Land Registry boundary. So the first thing I'm going to do is just select all of my existing ownership data. I'm just going to style it and just turn it slightly more opaque. The reason I do this is this then allows me to just have a slightly better view of what I've selected and what I haven't. So the bits that I haven't included are these little blocks of green. I can either copy them from the basic payment. So from the SBI, I can hold shift, select on those 3, right click and copy to plan. I might just repeat that because that was quite quick. So, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get these 3 projects, holding shift on my keyboard, clicking on 1, keep holding shift, clicking on 2, and clicking on 3. I can now let go of shift. I can then right click and I can hit copy to plan. And I can then copy those 3 features to my ownership plan. And by doing that now, I've got those 3 polygons are now part of my ownership plan. However, as I mentioned at the start, you're better off trying to use the entire land registry. So I'm just going to push undo and come back to that workflow. Instead, I'm going to go to data layers, type in freehold, which is where we've got land registry freehold data. And I'm now just going to look at the data that includes those 3 parcels and assume that that entire ownership boundary actually is part of my client's map. We'll come on to in a moment how you can double check this with your clients. They might have provided you with a paper map, but I just wanted to show you that because these three fields are within the ownership of my new attendee, what I'm going to do is I'm just actually going to select this entire land registry, which includes Cricket's Hill, right click on that land registry and bring that instead onto my ownership boundary. Those basic payment codes are now irrelevant. I've now got an ownership boundary that contains the outlines of those fields. Toggling off land registry, I now have got that additional in my boundary. Now for styling, as you can see, I've changed the default styling of this and my new one doesn't have the new styling. Not a problem. If you click on the one that you've got the styling of that you want to keep first, hold shift and select the other one, and then go into style and just touch the opacity, you then get everything dissolved into that new polygon. So I've now actually styled it all the same. That's just a little trick that might be of use. Okay, so I've now got a red line boundary, or at least a red outline boundary, which I can change the styling of. Maybe I don't want it to be so dark red in the middle, but I do want a slightly thicker red line boundary around the outside. Now, here's my ownership. Okay. So that's how you create an ownership boundary, which is very important for your declaration to the RPA. Obviously, you may want to know the total area, for example. And so there's 2 ways you can find the area of that object. So the first thing is, once you've got it like this, once I right-click select all, I can turn on the area, but what that's done is that's labeled all the different land registry blocks, which isn't a single hectarage. So the actual way that you can get a single hectarage, there's a cheat way, which I'm going to show you just because why not, which is you can just temporarily merge the features together. So if I merge them temporarily, I get a total sum of 14913, 14913. Just remember, if you need to, you can undo that. Or if instead you want to maybe not do any merging, you can actually come up to this reports tab at the top right and run your first plan report by hitting add plan and choosing ownership. Done. And what that should do is that now runs a report on all the different polygons that make up my ownership boundary. So for Slade's Farm, 149 is the size. Okay. So that's defining an ownership boundary. The next thing I'm just going to touch on, but again, this bit we covered in the introductory training, so I'm not going to labor the point. I'm just going to move ownership to the bottom of the list, is how do you edit data, i.e. improve the basic payment project that we've got. I've turned on the project. Individual features can be edited by clicking on a shape and hitting the change button at the right-hand side. So I'm on basic payment. I've got all the basic payment codes and search for barley. And you can do that en masse by holding shift and clicking on all the different polygons that haven't got a code, which in this case, all of which are arable land. And you can assign them all an arable code, such as fallow, for argument's sake. Again, I'm not going to labor the point on that. And I'm not going to touch on many of the drawing tools. They were covered in the introductory webinar, such as splitting, merging, buffering. Please do look back at the previous webinar if you want any more insight on how you can start drawing in buffer strips, etc. So what I've now got is I've got a basic payment, but I've got 3 different basic payment layers at the moment. I've got one with land parcels, one with land covers, and one with hedge data. Probably for best practice, we only really want one. We want one basic payment project that includes the hedges and the polygons, the land use covers. And I just want to quickly show you how you can merge all of your data into a single basic payment. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this project and remove the words land covers and just call this 2023, for example. So this is my BPS 2023. Then what I want to do is I want to move these hedge lines that are currently on my BPS Slade's hedge control layer. I want to move them all onto my 2023 BPS. The easiest way to do that is you click the 3 dots next to the hedge layer, hit select all, click done. I mean, you can specify just lines, but if you hit done, and what that does is that has now highlighted all of the features within this plan. I can now right click on just one of those and hit copy to plan. And that then allows me to then choose which of my existing plans do I want to move all those hedges to. In this case, my BPS 2023. I hit copy features to plan. It doesn't look like much has happened, but if I toggle off hedgerows and toggle on slades, you can see that now I've got those hedges have been highlighted. I can change the color of them, for example, just to illustrate. And there's my yellow hedges that I've just added to my BPS plan. Okay. Other things just to make you aware of, and I might just rename this one as well, but the land parcels maybe doesn't need to be a BPS project, but the land parcel data contains all of the field IDs that are assigned by the Rural Payment Agency, as does the land covers as well. So you may want to just file that one away at the top and mainly just work from a BPS. For me, I don't need this hedge layer anymore, so to save confusion, I'm actually going to archive it. I'm going to actually move it away. So I've got an ownership boundary and a basic payment. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on creating a land management plan. I'm going to be using the countryside stewardship template through this demo, but obviously next Tuesday I'll be using UK Habitat as the language, but the principle is the same. I just want to use my existing RPA data to start creating for my client where they want to be doing stewardship, whether that's part of a landscape restoration as per the Northeast Cotswolds cluster, as I just shown, or maybe just for the individual. So there's 2 ways you can go about it. For today's demo, I'm going to duplicate the entire basic payment project and just create an arbitrary stewardship with all that data. On Tuesday next week, I'm going to show a slightly different workflow that's more relevant for the biodiversity offsetting, but the principle is the same. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a countryside stewardship plan by hitting the 3 dots next to BPS. Actually, no, I've paused there. I'm going to hit new. We've introduced a new workflow. Hit new, choose use template. This time I want to find the countryside stewardship template. I'm choosing countryside stewardship. And what I want to do is I want to create it from an existing plan. So rather than starting from scratch and importing new data, I want to use the existing stewardship, existing BPS plan because it has, for example, my hedgerow lines on there as well. I then select the existing plan. So I want to create a stewardship from my existing BPS, hit next. And this time, again, checking Dan's infographic, going to look at naming it correctly, Slade's CSS, hit finish. And what that's now done is that has now created an exact replica of my basic payment, but in the language of countryside stewardship, i.e. there's no codes assigned. I can now very quickly start to build up a bit of a plan of where I want to target certain interventions. So some things might be whole field level, and I'm not going to be diving into what the stewardship codes mean, but let's just hypothetically say these 2 want to go into GS2. I can click on 1 or 2 shapes and assign it GS2. In this field, I may want to, just make this field a bit more rectangle by putting in an option in this corner. I can then right click, choose split, and maybe make that rectangle from, where would I want to go from here across to, let's go to here, double click. And now what I've done is I've split my field into 2. I can assign this little, oddly shaped bit, maybe a small field corner. So that's a whole field option and a part field option. Just wanted to draw those on. Okay. Other options you may want to be drawing are in-field options. So let's just hypothetically choose one of these fields for a lapwing plot. And by the way, we do cover how you do all of these functions during the introductory webinar. So I don't want to get caught up on the actual how to. I just want to mainly show you the type of thing you might be drawing. What I want to draw is a lapwing plot. So I'm going to basically choose a field. These might be slightly too small for a lapwing plot, but more to demonstrate the point. I can then add a rectangle. I can choose the width and the height. So let's go. I think there is a minimum requirement for lapwing plot, but I can't remember off the top of my head. what it is, and I then can assign lapwing to that particular feature. Okay. As a note, every time you're drawing a countryside stewardship option, a couple of things happen. The payment rate is automatically calculated, so how much I'd get paid per year for that particular feature, in this case, £36.69. And we also have a direct hyperlink to the .gov guidance as well. So if you do need to clarify what I've just said, which is what's the minimum area for a lapwing plot, you can have a look in here and try and find that as you're mapping. Okay, so that's a bit of a stewardship plan. And then the final thing is just there might be capital items. So drawing trees in field, I can click on a field, hit draw, choose, the different points I'm drawing. These could be in-field trees, for example. Tree planting, and that's hedgerow. Oops, hopefully you get the point. Protection for now. Or you may want to be drawing a hedgerow feature, like planting a new hedgerow. Click on the shape, click once, and then Land App automatically magnetizes to the edge of that field, like so. Okay, I can assign that to BN11, which I think is planting new hedges. Okay, so hopefully that's just illustrating how you can use the Land App just to help build up that picture. Again, we will be doing a training webinar for countryside stewardship fairly soon, so keep your eye out for that if you're more interested in what I was just drawing and why. We can touch on that during that webinar. But in principle now, for my new member, in 20 minutes, what I've managed to do is I've managed to download their data. I've got an area of their ownership. I've then uploaded to their map their field boundaries. So I've got their field parcels if I need them, or a basic payment plan, so a land use map. And I've also very roughly and crudely drawn a very basic countryside stewardship plan that took, a matter of moments and definitely needs more thought. But that's the principle, is you can quite quickly onboard, locate, and start drafting up plans for individual clients. The first thing that you're welcome to do is you may want to invite the farmer or the land manager into the map to say, hi, could you please just confirm the ownership boundary, whether it's right or wrong? Now, to do that, you go up to the sharing settings at the top right. And in here, you can add collaborators to your map. So it could be farmname@gmail.com, whatever it might be. And we've got different levels of permission. Really worth saying that for the facilitator model that we're promoting, farmers do not need to pay Land App a subscription. We have a subscription that farmers are welcome to join, and there are reasons they may want to join. But as a rule of thumb, we're only looking for the professionals that are facilitating the cluster to join the subscription. So just as a note. But there's 3 levels of permission. You can invite them as a read-only. So this might be that they've never used Land App before. You don't quite trust them to change things, but you do want them to come around and have a look. I don't know if this is actually going to be so farmname@gmail isn't registered with Land App. But read-only means they can come in and view the data. And so they'll be able to come in, zoom in and out. They'll be able to look at the corner and then maybe on the phone say to you, yeah, I'm looking at lower house at the moment and you've got that wrong. So you can kind of have that dynamic relationship with them. Or you can invite them as an editor and they can actually come in and manipulate the shapes, i.e. drag and drop, cut and delete features as well. So I'd say early on, err on the side of caution. Read only, it's definitely the place to start. However, use your farmers as a resource. You'll be amazed how many farmers are already, using software like this, if not Land App already. They're a really good resource and might be able to do a lot of the work for you. Read only an editor. The third permission, just want to spend 2 moments on that, is called Publisher. This is particularly powerful if your farmer that you're onboarding has already got a Land App map. So one of the early questions that you can ask is, have they already got some GIS software? Is it Land App? If the answer is yes, great, get them to add you as a publisher. By giving you publisher permission, one means you don't have to go through all the stages I've just shown you. They've probably already done it for you. And secondly, you can actually just go into their map and publish it to your map of maps, which I'll cover at the moment. And during the Q&A, if people want to learn a bit more about what publisher means, do pop it in the chat and we can definitely go around onto that. But yeah, read only an editor for any farm members you're inviting in, or publisher permission for anyone who's already got a map that you want to be part of. Okay, so publishing data is the next thing I want to touch on, which is how you can start creating a landscape view of all your different farms. So as I mentioned, I've done a bit of work yesterday just to try and prep this fake account. And so what I've done is I've published those 5 cluster members, just to recap, those 5 cluster members that I shown in this home map, but I really want to see what they all look like next to one another. So back in Slade's farm, the map I've just been creating, I'm going to first publish to my map of maps all of the plans that I want to see on map of maps. And the way I do that is I hover over the plan name. So firstly, I want to publish ownership, which is here, and click the black tick, and it then goes green. It then says publish to your organization's data layers. I also want to do the same for my basic payment project, and I want to do the same for my countryside stewardship project. Now, what that means, it doesn't seem like much has happened, but at midnight, every night, the Land app goes on your behalf and stitches together every plan that has got that tick turned green. And at midnight, it then creates a separate unique data layer for you that sits under this organization header. So within organization, I now have access to a number of different layers called map of maps, plan name, and I can toggle those on. So I'll start with ownership boundary and zoom out, and hopefully you'll be able to see some of the other farms that I'm working with in the area. As I mentioned, arbitrary boundaries, but at least just gives you an idea of their location. So you can see relative to one another where your farm clusters are with ownership boundaries. Okay. That's one. You can also then turn on baseline habitat assessment, for example, which is the habitat layer. So you can see where their existing habitats are or their countryside stewardship options. Again, a bit thin on the ground. Some of you have got way better stewardship maps than I have. But it allows you to start visualizing where one another's options are. And we're really, there's no time like the present to try and get farms and their habitats to be connecting through the landscapes. Another benefit of turning these layers on, and so let me just turn on, say, the basic payment, ownership boundary, so we can start to see these. You can also start to, well, firstly, you can print a map, which I'll come on to in a moment, but you can secondly start turning on other data layers to see how your farm cluster interacts with some of those data sets I mentioned in that slide deck. So for example, if I wanted to say which of my cluster members are in an AOMB, I can toggle on the AOMB and see instantly which of my cluster members are inside or outside. Same with triple SIs, the same with, what's the other good one? Where's my habitat networks? You really start to layer up these options and start to understand the context of the cluster that you're managing, the farm group that you're managing. How you can tell which farm is which, and I'm just going to turn off those designation layers for now. How you can tell which farm this one is, if you click on it, on the right-hand side, it will tell you the name of that farm. So the name of the farm will automatically be there alongside a hyperlink to their map. Worth reiterating that on map of maps, I can't edit this map. I can't delete it. I can't change the shape. It's because this is only a view of the map that's in the other, in that other area. To get to it, I need to click on, in this case, Farm D surname. That then opens up their particular map, of which I can turn on the layer and zoom to go and see what their farm looks like. And again, you can see how crudely I did this plan yesterday. It was very much just a demonstration, but I've got my BPS, my stewardship, my baseline habitat assessment. Okay. So for the final 5 minutes then, before we come to Q&A, and by the way, I can see some questions coming in. Please feel free to use the Q&A function to ask anything else you may have. The final thing I want to say is the other benefit of using Land App's publish function is we've got a new report dashboard that's gone live as of, was it last week or the week before, which basically is a way of quantifying what your map of maps is showing. So I've got a map of maps switched on at the moment. I can see I've got lots of farms in there, but the RPA have asked me, what's the total hectarage of your farm cluster? How much BPS do you have? What's the total area of your stewardship? And I want to show you the functionality that we've released. So the first thing is that you now find it within the reports button within your map. So you come in here and hit reports. That will then load a separate tab, which in Blue Peter fashion, I've loaded up here, just because when you first load it, it takes 10 seconds. And you're met with a home page. This homepage is representing everything that's published on my map of maps. So I've got a couple of maps up in the Norfolk. If I zoom in, there's going to be a couple of areas that I want to exclude because I'm actually only really wanting to work with my cluster. So the first thing that you can do is I can actually filter my dashboard by catchment. And so in this case, my arbitrary cluster or group is all within the way and tributaries. So that is now filtered out some of the work we're doing in Cheshire and Gloucestershire and up in Norfolk. And it's now showing me the 4 plans for which I was just showing your map of maps. The first thing that on this homepage, it shows you the total area. So I can extract, for example, that my 4 cluster members is 501.55 hectares, and it's broken down into this ratio of crop to grass to other. Also within my cluster, these are all the different high level stats. So I've got 501 hectares of basic payment drawn, 91 hectares of countryside stewardship, and 453 hectares of UK HAB baseline. We will be diving into some more of the functions like 30 by 30 during the BNG webinar next week. But the main thing I wanted to show you is actually a little teaser. So just to show you, once you've done the mapping and using the dashboard, that can start to quantify your group's biodiversity unit impact. So my 4 farms are actually causing a net loss of 7.5 units, which hopefully isn't the case across everyone's groups, but it's just a way of automatically calculating units. We'll come on to that next week. The main page I wanted to show was the basic payment and the countryside stewardship, because these provide an overarching map for your cluster and a breakdown of those different plan types by farm as well. Just to show you, here's the overarching map with all the different land use types that I can download and export if I want, or I might be more interested in just looking at a particular farm. Let's say farm A. I just want to show me farm A's breakdown. I could then have a look at, say, the basic payment for them, which in this case is 122 hectares of permanent crops. We're very much in the early stages developing this dashboard, so feedback's obviously welcome as well. But the tab that I want to show you is countryside stewardship. And this breaks down all of the stewardship plans that you've currently got on the Land app as published and gives you a breakdown of the payment rates, either at a cluster level, which this is currently showing, or as I was just looking at, you can break it down by individual farm member as well. Because I haven't got much data, like capital items, I forgot to draw those on, so they should show in here. And there is probably a null element somewhere I just need to have a look at, but that should summarize your 1st year and 5-year payment rates as well. We think this dashboard is the perfect tool for you to start, seeing your cluster as a group, to start administering your cluster as a single entity, but also be able to provide you with that deeper insight that you're going to need to, fill out forms from the RPA or apply, hopefully, for natural capital funding as well. This is part of what we're calling the premium package. And during the survey at the end, if you're interested in getting a quote, we can definitely get in touch. High level, it's about £25 a month per user, but either myself or Rosie would be more than happy to have a call to discuss getting you and your farm cluster up and running on the Land app. Okay, deep breath and 15 minutes bang on to go. We're going to move over to Q&A. So I'm just going to switch my screens over. And worth saying, actually, Land app mobile is out. Sorry, should have said that. That is available for all professional users to download from both the Android and the Apple Store if you're a subscriber. Q&A. Thank you, Rosie. I can see you doing lots of stuff in the background, and I am now going to work through them. Okay, so Charlie Davies, based in Scotland, it'd be useful to understand access to land registry data. So yeah, Charlie, we've got some guidance which you can access through our help and guidance page on the bottom right of the Land app. So just to show you here, there's a little pop-up. If in there you search for the word Scotland, you should then receive some guidance requesting field parcel data from Rural Payments Scotland. Unfortunately, they're not quite as easy as England. English has put it in a nice database that we can access. At the moment, it's still a bit of a manual process by emailing Rural Payments Scotland, but the principle is the same, and hopefully that helps. Nathan Nelson says, what sort of lag time is there between land registry data updates for recently purchased land? So we basically every week do a full refresh on the land registry, Nathan. Depending on a couple of other things out of our control, it might be more than a delay, but in principle, rule of thumb, within a week of the land registry updating, land app should show that within our data layers as well. Rural Payment Agency, slightly better. It's pretty much instant. As soon as the RPA accepts your data, you can import through the SPI number. Louisa, can you manually edit the map based on land registry if I need to select a smaller area, for example? Yeah, really good question. So I'm just going to zoom in to my map here. So say I want to edit this 24 hectares because actually my client says, you know, that far bit's not included. You can either do the split tool that we talk about quite a lot in the introductory webinar. So let's just say I split off that bit. I can delete that area there, or you can manually manipulate the shapes as well. So you can actually click on a shape and drag the corners if you so wish. But there's a couple of reasons you may not want to do that. So do check the introductory webinar for further guidance. Emily Winter, is it possible to import existing stewardship options? Yes, it is, Emily, good question. So you can go to new and hit import data, and then you can click the import file button. One thing that I just want to flag that is worth noting, if you just drag and drop it as is, it will just populate everything with just a red outline because LandApp doesn't detect the stewardship codes automatically. If you have got someone in your team that can help you, what's very much worth doing is reading this technical guide that we wrote about a year ago, which just shows you some of the key attributes that are in that GIS data that allow, when you upload it to the land app, for the stewardship to automatically color for you. And in particular, you want to make sure that there's a column that's called LA lowercase feature type with the stewardship code in, because then when you drag and drop it, we will automatically style it for you. So do get in touch if you need help with that, or if you've got a GIS, someone who can help you with a bit of GIS beforehand, very much worthwhile, rather than just dropping all the files in and they not color. But yeah, definitely possible for you just to import data as and how you need it. Can you pinpoint the exact location of a feature in a field, e.g. a lapwing plot or a large field tree? So you can pinpoint it both ways. So yes, I think the answer to your question is yes, but let me just demo what you mean. Sorry, Rose, you got rid of the name before I read it, sorry. Basically, there's a tree here, which I can see on the satellite imagery. So I can say, hypothetically, on my CS map, I want to add on my stewardship plan a point. So I can click new, hit point, and drop a point on that tree that I can see in the image. For that point, I can then extract the coordinates of that point by hitting this coordinates button at the bottom right. And I'm then given four different ways of articulating where that tree is. So I've got the national grid field number, i.e. the Rural Payment Agency's grid field system, the grid reference, which is Ordnance Survey's grid references, latitude and longitude, and then what 3 words. Most of those will hopefully cover all the use cases you've got. Plus, you can actually export that point if you so wish using our export function as well. Worth saying that that works in reverse, i.e. if someone gives you a what 3 words address or gives you a grid reference, you can paste that into the search bar, which is at the top of the screen here. And then when you search it, it then should zoom into that tree. It doesn't, depending on which one you use, grid reference, lat long, what 3 words, it doesn't go all the way in and drop a point, it just pans the screen to match that. Does the habitat layer show wildlife corridors to link between farms and land? So Tom, that's exactly what the local nature recovery strategies are trying to do. The data layers we've got some that are indicating target areas. They don't necessarily mean the corridors are there at the moment, but they're definitely good indicators for you as a group of farmers to try and join up. For example, if I just click off this map, maybe change the base map to gray, just so it's a bit easier to see. There are layers such as the habitat networks that I showed before, which is Natural England's, I think it's from 2021, so it's going to be updated fairly soon. But in principle, most of the brighter colors represent an existing habitat. So this one, for example, is wood pasture and parkland. There's another thing here, which is traditional orchards. And then the beige or brown colors represent either the enhancement zones or the fragmentation action zones, which are basically where Natural England wants to prioritize putting certain habitats to try and join up the networks. So that's definitely one targeting layer. The other one that you can overlay, which I do like to talk about as well, is beelines. So this is a more national data. This is a GB-wide data set, which is where bug life are trying to promote the creation of pollinator-rich habitats to try and improve invertebrate numbers. So if you're in a beeline, you know, get in touch with bug life. They're looking to help people find funding for wildflowers or hedgerow restoration or grassland management. And therefore you can see that actually there's certain farms or areas that are going to be higher priority, i.e. the ones that intersect both of these areas, than the ones that maybe don't intersect any at all. So yeah, definitely we've got to be strategic as a nation, and definitely using these strategic layers is a good way to facilitate a group. I can't find some of the stewardship options I'm looking for. Are certain options only apply for certain features? Trees to points? Yes, very good question, anonymous. I didn't quite catch your name, but the stewardship is templated based on the geometry you use. For example, if I'm clicking on a polygon, the only options I get on the right-hand side are features that have an area payment, i.e. payment per hectare, payment per meters squared, such as grassland management. If I'm trying to do, as your question asked, trees don't have an area payment, they have a payment per number, and therefore you have to draw a point feature before you get access to the tree planting options, and therefore the list of options is different for points, lines, and polygons, okay? So that's a really good point. I probably should have mentioned that, so thank you. Before you draw the shape, make sure you remember what the payment rate is going to be, i.e. is this a line, is this a point, or is this an area? And then draw accordingly. For chicken farms that have the poultry units and limited space around, what are the maps and templates that need to be used? So really good question. As per my infographic, what I would definitely use is through a farm infrastructure plan. And that's actually contained within our blank template. Within there are codes for buildings, there's code for woodland strips and buffer strips. And I'd probably just start by doing a farm infrastructure plan for a chicken broiler unit. But you also would then, you know, you might be interested in accessing some stewardship payments to try and maybe do some shelter belts, for example, or hedgerow planting around the outside. Or the other one is you can explore Ordnance Survey Master Map. Ordnance Survey Master Map is the purchase of licensed data, but it's really quite detailed, and actually could probably demonstrate it now quickly. It's really quite detailed data that allows you to create authoritative plans about what's either currently happening or what you want to happen next. So there you are. You can see this could be hypothetically a broiler unit. You could then create a bit of a plan around that. Quick sip of water. Yeah, so Tom has asked, we're interested in the sequestration of carbon. Can this be clustered together and calculated? Absolutely. So in our dashboard, we've got this little coming soon button. It's probably quite faint, but we've already derived and created a proof of concept for a carbon calculator and for a nutrient neutrality calculator as well. We're just doing some testing and just maybe partnering up with a couple of other organizations to make sure we're happy with the outputs. But in principle, yes, you will be able to, off the back of your habitat maps and the back of your management plans or stewardship plans, start to forecast or estimate the carbon sequestration. But remember, there's going to be, with carbon in particular, you know, there's quite a lot of moving parts, and therefore we can't assume that we're absolutely 100% correct. What we can do is say, look, as a cluster, we are moving at approximate X tons per year based on our management plans. Question from Terence: are there data layers, e.g. ASSI, AOMB, Ramsar field boundaries for Northern Ireland? So for Northern Ireland, we are we're limited in how many data layers we can get in. Where you can do a base maps. Let me just go into, sorry. It's great to see the Northern Ireland. At the last webinar, we had Northern Ireland questions as well. So we are fully aware we would like to, you know, do a bit more in Northern Ireland. So I think Northern Ireland layers, we can definitely do base maps. So you can at least create plans. We don't have any land registry data. And I don't honestly know off the top of my head which designations we've got. What it might be worth is us, yeah, if I toggle these off, I don't know if Ramsar might be actually, because that's includes the C, doesn't it? Oh yeah, there we are. There's Ramsar. Oh no, RSPB reserves. There's a data layer that we do have. So I'm not sure if we've got a defined list of what does include Northern Ireland, but I'll definitely take it away as a bit of feedback, just to be clear on that. NERA, I think it's called, Northern Ireland Environmental Records, something association, has started to release data in a nice format. It's just down to us to make the the business case, whether it's worth investing time to try and wire it all in, because it's no easy feat just getting these datas in. There's quite a lot of work that has to go behind the scenes. Can you please confirm whether there's a way to bulk upload HMLR titles from a spreadsheet into LandApp? So yeah, so land registry titles, we've got a bespoke mapping service, and actually we're going to hopefully be releasing it as a tool. But if you've got a spreadsheet with all the land registry titles, we can now create a polygon layer from it. However, you just need to get in contact with us at support at the LandApp, and we just need to provide you with a quote at the moment to do it, because it takes us, depending on how big the area is, a bit of time, but we're looking to try and build that in as a tool. So it is possible. So if there's an urgent need to do it, get in touch. We can, we can definitely have a conversation about that, rather than you manually trying to click on all the shapes, because that can take a little while, especially if it's a big area. Another question from Emily. Does the RPA hold CS data that LandApp can use at all? So unfortunately not. The Rural Payment Agency used to collect geospatial data on countryside stewardship. They have since moved to just using the spreadsheet and a PDF printout map. However, we want to mobilize the land management sector to try and bring the land management sector back into digital. And it's something that us and me personally are fighting for, which is, can we have digital submissions of stewardship? If the RPA received this data, it would be way more powerful to host on a database rather than a spreadsheet and an image of a map, which doesn't have the insight that you can gather. So not yet. However, if you want to join the Make Land digital campaign that we're hopefully going to launch soon, get in touch, because I'm confident that what we've got here amongst some of our other partner tools is enough to revolutionize the system in the same way that tax did a couple of years ago. Nick, is it possible to import CS option boundaries from Gatekeeper? Yes. So if you export them from Gatekeeper, you can import them by just dragging and dropping, Nick. However, as I mentioned before to one of the questions, do have a quick read of this technical guide. If there's any way in particular for you to change the column heading for the column that contains the stewardship code to this LA feature type, it would save you a lot of time. So do get in touch if you need help with that. And we can, or speak to anyone in your team that's got a bit of GIS skills. Question from Zephyr. Nice to have you here, Zephyr. When importing data layers such as local nature recovery strategies, is it possible to import a layer file with the shape file to bring the symbology into LandApp? No, unfortunately not at the moment, Zephyr. We've got our own standard symbology that's fixed to the plan template. So each of the templates we've got within the data, within our data layers, have a fixed schema. Importing data will always lose that symbology if it's bespoke. It's something we get asked often, and I suppose it's just one of those things we've never got around to doing. We've been focusing on other things, but it's definitely on the list. Just when it happens, I'm not sure. Saying that, exactly the same. If you can upload that data, Zephyr, if it's a habitat layer, for example, and give it a UK HAB code, or if it's a targeting layer, you can give it a stewardship code. It will then color following our plan templates, which might be a workaround. Martin, can you import all the large trees as one hit from, say, Sentinel for an estate? Yes. So you just, again, need to aggregate it into a single file, a package of data, and you can drag and drop it as a single package. I think for that particular use case, if you need help from our mapping service, just get in touch with support. But it is possible, just needs a bit of GIS bandangling, so to speak, before you upload it. Paul, I'm sure this will be covered next week, but to obtain biodiversity units, are you running the UK HAB on land registry parcels through Natural England's metric tool? Would it be possible to bring higher resolution habitat data in with condition surveys? Paul, really great question, and definitely stuff we're going to cover next week. I suppose just to answer the questions now is, yes, we are using Natural England's metric tool. We've built our own calculator off the logic of that, and we've provided a way of you exporting your data in the format of the tool itself, so you can kind of drag and drop. and I will be discussing next week. We've got an algorithm that can take any boundary and provide a best guess of the habitats you find within there, ready for biodiversity offsetting. And it is possible, yes, to bring in higher resolution habitat data. Again, following this technical guidance, if you've already got habitat data, just make sure the UK HAB code has got a column called LA feature type with the HAB code in, e.g. G1 or C1A6, drag and drop it, and then you should have your up-to-date habitat data all fully formatted in the baseline habitat template. Sarah, can you also import HLS options as well as CSS with the color? Yep, really good point. So same principle, importing them, make sure that the column with the HLS code is with LA feature type. But this time, when you're importing the data, I'm just going to refresh my screen for some reason, it's playing up. When you're importing the data, just make sure you're using the environmental stewardship template, which is this one, because HLS and ELS, environmental stewardship, are the older template. But yeah, same principle, just need to use a slightly different template. ELS, HLS is environmental stewardship, and then mid-tier and higher tier is countryside stewardship. Okay, so we've just gone past 3 o'clock. I'm going to wait on the link for 5 minutes, just in case anyone wants to stay for a chat. I'm happy to come get you off mute if you want to say something. If not, thank you so much for joining. I think that's covered all the questions that we've got. One more has just come in, which are answered from Grace. But just a reminder, as you leave, please do take 2 seconds to answer the 5 questions. They're just yes, no answers and a couple of ranking ones. If you could, that would really be appreciated. Thank you all for your time. Final question then from Grace, just while we're here. Is there a template for section 31 footpaths? There's not a template, Grace, but we do host the data, the data layer for public rights of way, if that's what you're referring to, which is just the location of the existing bridleway and public access paths across the country. There isn't a template as such, so hopefully that's answered your question. Okay, so if anyone, while I'm here for 5 minutes, if anyone wants to come off mute and join the conversation and maybe ask a question live, feel free to put your hand up. And if not, I will assume that either people are drinking tea and are no longer here, but there's still a good number of you on the call. So happy to wait around for 5 minutes if anyone's got any more questions, and thank you for joining. Two people raise their hand. Great. Okay, so Terence has, no, he's put it down. Martin Steer, hello. Let me allow you to talk. There we are. And how are you doing, Martin? Nice to see you joined us. See you off mute, but I can't hear you. Rosie, can you hear Martin?
No, I can't. Can't hear Martin.
Okay, Martin, I think you might be having some troubles with your microphone. Rosie, while you're there, is there any other questions or?
We've got one from someone anonymous. Is there a quick way to remove individual field boundaries to show a project area / cluster boundary?
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. And Martin, bear with us. I'm just going to answer this question, and if you can get off mute, we can come back to that. So I think I understand what you mean. So you're saying that there's a cluster boundary. Let me just turn off those. It could be a water body. Let's just say hypothetically river water body, like so. And I want my cluster, which is, let's go for ownership. So I basically may want to clip my cluster by boundary. Yeah. The dashboard, so the reports dashboard would allow you to filter out, show me all the plans within this boundary or all the plans within this one. On the land app itself, it's quite a difficult one to do, to be honest, I think. Remove individual field boundaries to show a project area or cluster boundary. Yeah, anonymous attendee, I'm not quite sure which function you need, but I know if you are within here and hypothetically one of your, say in this scenario, one of my parcels was outside of the area of interest. So say this one was hypothetically out here, you can right click on that parcel and delete it if that helps. But in terms of a quick way, yeah, I'm not sure if I can help on that one, I'm afraid. Okay, Martin, are you with us? No. Okay. Not to worry, Martin. Anyone else who's still in the room? There's still 30 of you or so. Does anyone else want to raise their hand and come and ask a live question? Jeremy, I've allowed you to talk.
Hi there. Have you? I have exchanged emails with Tim. Have you got any clients yet who are using drone-derived aerial imagery as a base map?
We have tried it. The problem is, Jeremy, is that these drone images are so high resolution that the poor land app struggles with the size of them. That being said, we have got a proof of concept for hosting those images as a slightly separate service, but to be honest, that won't be live for another couple of months minimum. So it is possible in the future, but as of today, I would just assume rule of thumb, we can't quite handle drone images.
Right, but there again, you could lower the resolution to make it scalable.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that high level is that the main data format of which people can import themselves is vector. So like the shapes of the fields or the shapes of the woodland.
Yeah.
When it's an image file, it's a slightly different workflow that we haven't quite given our users the ability to play with.
Yeah, I'm mainly using GeoTIFFs. That I've just done a farm last week. We've been looking at the set aside and elms, and we're using the aerial imagery to facilitate working out where to put things, and it's worked out very well.
Okay, good. I'm really excited. You know, some of the GeoTIFF data that's out at the moment, the Environment Agency is releasing loads. It's definitely, you know, on us to get that functionality working. I think we just need another import function that works for raster data, so GeoTIFFs. And yeah, watch this space, but at the moment, not yet. We've got some other priorities that we're trying to complete first.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Let me disable talking for you, and then Rob Brown, hello. Oh, I've accidentally just, oh, sorry, Rob, that was me. I invited you and then I got rid of you. Sorry, Rob, if you come on off mute now, that should work.
How's that?
There we are. I can hear you.
There we are. Oh yeah, thanks for that session, really helpful. I've just purchased as a little experiment a sort of GPS booster to use with my iPhone.
Right.
Just wondering if you've, while your own app is being developed and enhanced, are you aware of any iOS-based apps that they can use to measure things on site and export out back into the land app?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the moment on our mobile app, you can measure, but it doesn't save that measurement as a shape. So there's no export. Can I recommend one? We played around with Mergin, which I think is a, can't remember who made Mergin. That's got like a free basic functionality that I've successfully moved as a GeoJSON file from Mergin to land app. So that might be one. And then the others, free. Yeah, I'd probably say the only one QField's the other one, but QField relies on having quite a lot of QGIS knowledge, which you may or may not have. I'm not sure.
I definitely don't.
Okay.
I have used SW Maps on an Android phone before, and it is now available on iOS, but I cannot for the life of me find any instructions on how to use it. It's a shame.
Yeah, unsure. We're hoping that land app will be able to do that. I've been speaking to the product developer. He gave me October as a time when we're going to hopefully be able to host your own plan, so see your boundaries and save, you know, draw a shape and save that shape or measurement. So, and I think that's a conservative estimate, and we get a lot. I think we've had nearly 1,000 people download the mobile app, which is great, but there's a lot of people that are saying, look, I want it to do X, Y, and Z. So there's clearly demand and a appetite from the customers. We've just got to now try and build it with our dev team.
Oh, thanks ever so much. Appreciate that.
No problem, Rob. Thank you. Martin, hello. Are you there, or are we gonna? I think I have to call it a day on Martin's question. No. Okay. So unless anyone else wants to raise their hand, final call. If not, we will end the session now. As mentioned before, the recording will be hosted on our YouTube channel. We really like to hear from you, so do get in touch with any questions. And if you are facilitating a farm group, hopefully this isn't the last time we speak. We'd love to, get involved and help a bit more. Okay. All the best, everyone. Thank you. And the next webinar is Friday. We're looking through managing some estates, and then Tuesday next week, we're then doing biodiversity offsetting. Anyway, take care all, and we will hopefully see you soon. Bye-bye.